All right, I believe we are live. Hello, everyone. Welcome back to another Purpose and Pixie Dust podcast. I'm super excited for today's guest, for you guys to meet her and to learn from her today. So I'm Lindsay Dallinger. I'm the host of this show, and we have Megan Yelaney. Am I saying that right? Yelaney, correct?
Yep, perfect.
Okay.
Yep. Most people get it wrong. I'm very impressed.
I have listened to Megan's podcast for a really long time. That's actually how we connected, is we were both in a podcast mentoring group, I guess, cohort together. And anyway, I already had quote unquote known Megan from listening to her podcast. And so when she had talked about doing a podcast swap, I was like, oh my gosh, yes, I have to do this. So
I Megan, do that. That makes me so happy. Yay.
Yes. Probably one of the first podcasts that I listened to, actually. When I very first started listening to, the whole podcasting world, when my mind got opened up to it. Thank you so much for being on the show, and tell us a little bit more about you. Who are you? What do you do? All the things.
Thank you. Thank you for having me. I love podcasting. It's hands down my favorite thing to do, and just have good conversations with good people. So happy to be here. I am a podcaster, speaker, and business mentor. I really focus on helping women remodel their businesses so that it can support their home lives, their marriages. I say thrive in your business as much as your bank. Thrive in your marriage as much as your bank. That's really my goal. Just because of my story and my remodel to really support my family life, but still build a really successful business. And then I also help people come up with what I call my unique coaching method, or their unique framework. How can you stand out from everyone else out there doing something very similar sounding? There is definitely a unique spin you can have, and that can really lead the way for a lot of your offers, your content planning, a lot in your business. So I work on helping people define that and really lock that in. So it's a hodgepodge of fun stuff over here. So
when did you get started in the whole coaching business realm? How did that happen?
I technically got started in the coaching realm in 2011, the end of 2011. I signed up for a network marketing company because I had been selling the products for a year, not knowing you can make money. I was just getting everyone to do it because I changed my life. I was like, everyone needs to do this. And I was like, wait, I could have been making money this whole time. So I dove in and I really loved that business. It was awesome. I thought that was the end all be all. I said, I'm going to be a millionaire coach. That's what it's going to be. And then a few years later, I got the itch and I was like, all right, I think there's something else out there. It was a great start. I absolutely love the company, still use their products, and it was a really great experience and such a great way to get started in business. I think you learn so many fundamentals and you don't need to create a product. And so I learned so much from that experience. But then in 2016, 2017, I started to get an itch and I was like, I want to create my own. So I built that up to a very successful business. My husband was able to quit his job. He was pursuing his own business on the side. So we were living the entrepreneur life, traveling and all that. And so for me to go, wait, I don't know if I want to do this anymore. I want to start something new, is a little scary. But now here we are, 5-6 years later, we've built $1 million company and we have a pretty well-known brand, and we're helping so many people just be themselves on social media essentially and build their businesses by being uniquely who they are. But I got my start in 2011. So it's been a hot minute since we've been doing this.
Yeah. And I don't think I remembered that you started in network marketing, because I did as well. And I think that there are so many people that I've interviewed who also started in network marketing. And I think that's such an important thing to remember, especially for everyone out there because I feel like network marketing can be such a misunderstood industry.
Totally.
But it really is such an awesome way for women to get their foot in the door of some sort of business and learn and take advantage of a lot of those trainings and things that network marketing companies offer, and then do their own thing and take it to the next level. So I really love that.
I agree. Yeah. I know a lot of people who got started in network marketing. It's very common. So yeah.
Well, and Keisha, who is in charge of our podcast, did as well, which is so funny.
That's how we know each other. It's from Beachbody.
Exactly. Well, and
from that.
Beachbody was my first company too.
It's awesome. Yeah. And it's again, love the company. I personally had a great experience with them. It wasn't I don't like it. It wasn't that at all. It was just there's more I'm meant to do,
I totally understand. Yeah, 100%. Okay. Talk to us a little bit. You kind of mentioned already about how your business pivoted and changed. What did that remodel look like?
Yeah. Oh my gosh. So it's kind of funny because I never had a traditional 9 to 5. I did like background work on film and television and cocktail waitressing. I was, and still am a performer, musical theater. And so never had like a 9 to 5. It was more like a 6 a.m. to 9 p.m. kind of thing, 4 days a week. But you leave a 9 to 5, let's say, to go into your own business. And before you know it, you're working a 9 to 5, but actually like 12-hour days. And that's kind of what happened. I grew pretty quickly in my third business I went from network marketing to health and wellness and then to business coaching, because that's really what I should have been doing the whole time. Network marketing, you only do really well if you're building the business. And so once I dove into that, I was like addicted to it. I was like, wait, this is it. This is like my calling. So it's supposed to do. My marriage was also struggling a lot of that time. So it was like a distraction for me to let's just go all in on this because I'm good at this, let's hold on to what I'm good at. So there were some unhealthy and healthy coping mechanisms happening during that time, but I went all in, and it showed in my income, in my growth, like my business 5 times in 1 year. It was wild how much it grew from all those years of building from network marketing. That definitely helped. So I never say it wasn't overnight at all. It just kind of seemed it in a sense. But it really took off, which was amazing. But all of a sudden, like I look at my business and I'm like, it cannot run without me. I am in every piece of this. If I'm sick, if I'm not there, things crash and burn. And at that point, and this is something I share a lot about in my story, my husband and I had separated for 6 months. And when we got back together, it was like, you've got to change stuff around. Like I don't see you. And when I do see you, you're exhausted and drained and tired all the time. And I just needed to change a lot around. And so that was one of the bigger pivots that I've made, not industry wise, like obviously from network marketing to health coaching was industry pivot. And then from health to business was industry pivot. But this was more so the way I did business, the way I showed up, the way I sold, the way I launched, all of that kind of stuff. And I had to get rid of a lot of programs. I had to change how much access people had to me in certain programs. I leaned into more evergreen style selling and not as much live launching. So much had to change. And now I'm at this other pivot point now where I'm wanting to get more into speaking and podcasting and brand deals and sponsorships. So now I'm in a whole other pivot, and it's like really exciting and also so scary because I have no clue what I'm doing in so many ways. I'm like, I don't know what this next stage looks like because I've never done it before. So it's very exciting, but scary at the same time. So many, many pivots along the way.
I love that. And I love how you are so like authentic and raw about sharing that like your marriage wasn't perfect and you're like taking your portion of the blame for that with like, I was throwing myself into my business instead of dealing with the things that I could have been dealing with. So what kind of advice do you have for those of us listening who are in a relationship or not even a significant other? Maybe it's you're throwing yourself into your business to avoid, day job, like all the sorts of things. Let's talk a little bit about that.
That's for sure. It's such a great question because I think I just actually recorded an episode about this, like how sometimes work can be such a great coping mechanism and it gives us a purpose, right? When we're feeling really defeated, especially if you're dealing with grief or loss. But if you're not processing your feelings and you're just escaping them with work, that's when it can turn into an unhealthy coping mechanism, if you will, right? And so that's really what was going on for me. It was definitely an escape in some great ways, but it was also like, oh, I'm just literally ignoring a lot of the stuff that's happening. And then once we separated, it did give us that time to go, okay, where was my blame? Where was his blame? What do we need to both work on together separately, so that when we're back together, we can work on this together. So some things that I would really recommend doing is if you feel like you're regulating your mood with your business, or I should say, if your mood is regulated based on your business, that's when you want to take a look at it. Like if you have a great month, you are on a high and you're so happy. But if you have a client leave a contract, or clients are just struggling, or there's a season, or there's a recession, or the economy is not going great, like if your business and your mood is so affected by that, that's when I would go, okay, something that's a sign, in my opinion, because entrepreneurship is so up and down. It's a roller coaster. Literally, that book is so accurate. And if we're only happy when our business is doing well and when we're making lots of money, then those inevitable downturns, our mood is totally regulated by it. And I realized my entire worth was tied to my business and my success. And there was a point where I only felt worthy and good and like I'm a good enough human if I was making a certain amount of money. And that's when I was like, I don't like that. I don't like that my whole being is based on how much income I'm bringing in. I can't control that. There's so many things out of my control around that. And I can say with full confidence today, like I've gotten rid of so many things. Like we're rebuilding back to get where we were financially, but in such a different way. And I am more at peace and happier than I ever was when I was making crazy money every month because I was drained and my whole worth was based off of how much I was making. Does that make sense?
100%. And I have definitely recognized that tendency in myself because my love
Yeah.
language is recognition. So
Yeah.
it
Oh,
can
you
be
must have
really
loved network
hard.
marketing then.
I did. Oh yeah. I'm like, yes, next rank, next thing, like next
Right.
award, like going. Yeah, every time there's an incentive, like it's that competitive, that competitiveness. And
Yeah.
I know, at least for me, like those sorts of things can be really hard to
Yeah.
detach your worth and yourself from those sorts of
Totally.
achievements.
Yeah.
So what advice would you have if someone's like, okay, I recognize myself in that, in
Mm-hmm.
balancing, your relationship with your business? What did you
Yeah.
find that you kind of mentioned a little bit with changing your product structure a little bit, but maybe the woman
Mm-hmm.
listening who's a network marketer, what could she do?
Yeah. I mean, first, honestly, is have a really honest talk with your partner or the relationship, whatever it is. It could be a family member. It could be a one of your. I mean, I guess with your kids, it's a little bit different. But have a honest conversation about, hey, here's like why I'm in this. Here's my goal with this, and really relate it back to your goal as a family, as a unit, like to strengthen what you can do with them, like your experiences. Because a lot of times, I think people are not that they're not supportive, but they don't understand it because they're not in it. And so they don't see that vision. And we assume that they see it. We're like, oh, well, I've told them it. And it's like, have you really told them it though? Have you really sat them down and said, here's where I see this going? Get them in it with you. And not that they need to be in the business and doing things on the side with you. It's not that. It's just like have them buy into the vision with you. Because if they don't, it's going to feel like so separate. And that's really where my husband and I were. We were very separate with our businesses. It was like my win, his win, and it was never together. Where now it's like he gets just as excited about the growth of the business. I get excited about, he's a professional poker player. So like when he has poker games, I'm like supporting him. I don't understand what happens. I don't know poker at all, but I'm like, yes, that's amazing, And so I found that when you can have them buy into the vision with you, it's so much easier to be motivated to have those like work sessions you need to have, be really focused. But then when you're not working, actually be off. And I guess that would be my second piece of advice is once you sit down and have that talk about like, here's the vision, this is what we're doing together, set boundaries, like set work hours and set some boundaries to actually stick to them. Because I think we set work hours all the time and then ignore them. So I'm reading Atomic Habits right now. So it's very much in my head. It's such a good book. And like set some cues and triggers so that if you cannot not pick up your phone when you're with your family, put it in another room when you're with your family. Like get rid of those temptations, if you will, and really try to have your work be work and your personal life be personal life as much as you can.
I love that. Those are great, and I love that book too. Is that your
So
first
good.
time reading it?
Yeah, first time. And I do a lot of that like accidentally, I guess, or maybe from other things I've heard. But it's like when you hear it from this perspective, I'm like, oh, this makes so much sense. And I just love his perspective of like, it's not willpower, it's not grit, it's not someone's more motivated or dedicated. It's like your environment and setting
Yeah.
yourself up for success. I was like, oh, that's so much better than like shaming yourself into doing something. Like that doesn't last at all.
Yeah. It's so simple too, like that simple
Yeah.
tweak, and you're like, oh my gosh, that makes it so much easier.
Yeah. I love it. I really do.
Yeah.
He's great.
Okay. So I would love to talk because you mentioned about how your business has pivoted and changed so much over the years, but you
Mm-hmm.
still have maintained, I feel like, your brand, your community.
Mm-hmm.
And I know that's a huge part of your coaching method. So talk to us about like why that's important, how you have been able to do that. Because like I said, we do have a lot of network marketers who listen to the show. And
Cool.
I know for some of them, they will be pivoting and growing and doing different things.
Yeah.
Why is brand, and building a community right now so important for that?
Yeah. Oh, I love that. And yeah, that's something that when I look back, I'm like, oh, this brand has been the same for many years. That's pretty cool. Like I didn't have to change just because my business changed dramatically, like from fitness coaching to business coaching, completely different industry, same brand, pretty awkward brand. And even when I was in network marketing, my team, we were called Heart Rate Heroes, but we would always say we're the awkward, like awkwardly us, I think we would say, or the word awkward was in there. So it actually did start back in network marketing. And really, when you're thinking about your brand, you want to think like, what is your bigger mission overall, and try not to, like, this is where you want to be very general and vague, honestly. Like usually it's like get as specific as possible, but here it's like, what's your overall mission and vision? And for me, it's, I want people to show up as fully as themselves, unapologetically, like, here I am, awkwardness and all, take it or leave it, whether that's in their health, whether that's in their business, whether that's in the network marketing company, so that it can span everything. And so if you have that like bigger purpose and vision that is a little bit more vague sounding, it can go with you throughout everything. And then you're basing your brand on who you are at your core and your values versus, and your personality versus something that's going to change every single time you pivot. And not that your personality and your values won't change, they might adapt and grow as you learn new things and take on new roles in life. When you get married, if you have kids, like obviously huge life changes will change those things. But at your core, most people I know, their values are their values. Those don't usually change that much. So when you build it off of that, it's always relevant. You never have to actually change. I haven't had to change my brand at all. It's only strengthened, honestly, because it was based off of my values at my core and my bigger overall vision, if that makes sense.
Yeah, 100%. Now, in 2011, when you got started, were you a Facebook girl, Instagram girl? What did your social media look like compared to now?
Oh yeah. Oh my gosh, 2011. Gosh. Yeah. I remember I did my first post on Facebook, my Facebook personal page, which I think is technically illegal. Like, I don't think you're allowed to market, right?
It is.
I was like,
Yeah.
I don't think we're allowed to do that, but I never got in trouble. So I don't know anyone who's gotten in trouble from that, but I don't think you're allowed to. And all I used was my Facebook personal page for, I remember the first post I did, it was like taking 3 to 5 people, blah, 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 you know, the typical post that we were taught to do. It worked. It was my first one, and not as many people were doing it at the time. So it definitely worked, which is great. Does not work now, people. I promise you, you got to be more original than that. But it was Facebook personal. And then I think I started on Instagram, like dabbling in 2012, but not until like 2014 did I really start using it. And 2014, 2015, that's honestly when my business took off. But for network marketing, I built it all on my Facebook personal page pretty much, and my Facebook group. That was it. And now
Facebook groups. Yep.
Very different now.
Yeah. So what does that look like now? What's your primary, I guess maybe even primary community, because you have your podcast as well. Yeah. So where are all your communities? How do you manage that with your brand?
Yeah, I would say the podcast is the number one place, definitely, that I feel like I build the community, and that I like refer to my people, and my best stuff is there for sure. So it's the podcast is definitely number one. And I would say second is Instagram. Right now I have a Facebook group, and you know, sometimes it's popping and sometimes it's on fire and sometimes it's very quiet in there. And I've taken courses, I've had Facebook group growth experts, and I think that's just the nature of a lot of those groups. Unless you're like a huge group that has a lot of promotion, it's just how it's going to be. And I've kind of like accepted that, and it goes through seasons, you know, but I do have a community there. But I'd say the podcast and then my Instagram are the two biggest places. And we're recently get on TikTok, but expanding in a slightly different way, focusing more on like the marriage and business aspect, and honestly having a lot of fun. Like, that's just like a fun app, in my opinion.
I love that. And so then are you directing your TikTok traffic to your Instagram? Like, how are you, or is that just kind of like a fun, like, exposure piece for you right now?
Right now, I have my Instagram linked on my TikTok, because you can have, you know, everyone can have their Instagram linked. But I have the link in my bio on TikTok is my podcast actually page. So it's my like website for the podcast, because that's really where I want to drive people to, is the podcast. And then within the show notes and the ads and all of that, people can opt in for the email list and everything. So it's really driving traffic to the podcast right now. I'll go through seasons though, where like if I'm running a challenge, or if I want to drive traffic to a freebie, I'll switch out the link. But that's pretty much where I'm sending people now from TikTok.
For the lady who is listening to this, or I guess there's gentlemen who listen to this too, but I always just talk to my women listeners. Yeah. Who has been thinking maybe about starting a podcast, but wasn't quite sure how to make that a business or make it a part of her business. Can you kind of share how you did that with your podcast from when you started to where it is now?
Yeah, totally. I think the easiest way to get started with your podcast, like relating it to your business, is have the content be around your business. So if you like normally, let's say if you would post on Instagram 3 times a week and one of them was like a really in-depth carousel educational type post, do a really big expansion on your podcast that week. And so that's what I started doing is instead of approaching it like, what am I going to post on Instagram this week? I went, okay, what is the podcast going to be? And then how will my other content support that? So that was the lead. Like the podcast was the lead. And if I was in launch for something or wanted to warm people up for something, say if I had a launch in 2 months from now, I would have about 6 weeks out very intentional content that was speaking to that ideal client so that they were getting warmed up through the podcast. And by the time we launched, it was like, oh, they've already had 6 weeks of this kind of stuff. So I honestly think it helps you plan your content so much easier because it's like the anchor content, if you will. And you can do this with a blog too. And then you can have everything else like be like mini versions, whether it's a really good, Keisha does this really great, whether it's really a good post, like a quote post, one of those really viral type quotes that drives traffic, or if it's a reel, or if it's just an audio clip and video of the interview. But I'm like, wow, it's so much easier to plan my content now because of my podcast.
I totally agree. My sister just pulled in, so my dog is probably going to bark. So I'm like,
You're good.
I'll talk quick before I mute myself.
Real life. I love it.
Yeah, I know. Yeah. And the thing that I love, and I love that you mentioned blogging too, is that like kind of like long form content that that can stick around for. So I guess a YouTube video could be something similar as well. But that stuff that people can find and then you can pull your little pieces out of, I think is so genius. And so you are switching your focus, you said, on finding like sponsors and things like that from your podcast to start monetizing even more, correct?
That's the goal. Like our goal is to grow the podcast, to start to get sponsors speaking. We're actually starting a new series in January that I think is really going to be the catalyst called Couples Conversations. And so we're going to interview, my husband and I are going to interview other entrepreneur couples and basically like what's been the hardest. I know, I'm so excited. I literally can't wait. All I want to do is be on interviews all day. Like that's my favorite thing is like, what's been the really tough times? And they're going to be very honest and like, why are you still together? Basically, like what has helped you stay together? Because business and entrepreneurship is not easy to do with marriage. It's hard. It's like a whole other layer on top of already marriage being hard. So it's gonna be really fun. I'm excited for what we have lined up with that. So that's the goal, is like that helps really, really grow the podcast in a different way, in a different avenue, and then hopefully dive into all the other fun stuff with sponsors and brand deals and all that jazz. So totally different than any way I've made money before. So very new territory for me.
Yeah, I love that. And how long has your podcast been around?
About 3 years, which is wild. Yeah.
So it's so interesting because I feel like when we listen to other shows and stuff, and then we get the idea for starting our own show, we think that we have to have all of these things in place. We have to already have sponsors, and we already have to have, freebies and maybe even an email list and all of this stuff. But I'm sure you didn't have all of that starting out, right?
No, oh my gosh. I did have an email list. Like my business was pretty set up by the time I launched. 2019 was like a big growth year for me. So I had an email list and I would email my list about my podcast, but no I still don't have sponsors 3 years later. Like I never tried to get sponsors. I wasn't intentional about that. And also the way I was building was very much more like, how can this lead to my group programs and my launches versus how can I just grow a really great like community? And I feel like over the last year we've switched to that, which is why it has grown. Because it wasn't just like, driving traffic to offers. That's what it was before, which that was the purpose before. And now the purpose has changed a bit. But no, you don't need, honestly, if I could put any advice to anyone, it's like, get started as soon as possible with a podcast. Like it could be so cheap or free. You just have to pay for your hosting site. And especially if you want to build a loyal community that is like diehard and wants to come listen every week, like you just got to start talking. You just got to start talking, and you're going to get better and better. And like, you're never going to have everything lined up. You don't need it lined up.
Well, and I feel like if it's like your thing, like I feel like it is a lot simpler, at least for me, than, jumping necessarily on a normal video or
Mhm.
like sitting down and writing blog post. Like I would rather talk on a podcast all day long. I'm like, I wish I
Yeah,
would have started sooner than I did.
same. Mhm.
Yeah. So
For
if you're,
sure. It's so
yeah.
much easier sometimes for not
Mhm.
everyone. Obviously, some people feel more confident writing, but most people I've talked to lately, they're like, I just feel like if I could just speak people get it. But it's like putting it into words on text is tough sometimes. I'm like, yeah, that's why podcasting is great. You just like have a talk with someone. It's wonderful.
Yeah. Yeah. Talk to us a little bit about how you officially switched from network marketing to your business coaching. Like, was it something cut and
Mhm.
dry that you decided to do? Did you make like an announcement? But like, what did that
Mm.
transition look like?
Yeah, it's so funny. I'm actually talking to one of my really good friends right now who is on my team, technically in network marketing, still one of my best friends, and he started his life coaching business this past year. And he's like, it's actually like done pretty decent. I see the potential here. And I'm like, yeah, I know. And he's kind of having that balance of like, okay, but this is fully supporting me. And so I kind of looked at it. This is my approach, right? Might not be for everyone, but I looked at my network marketing business as, okay, now that's my 9 to 5. I'm trying to leave, right? And not leave, like I'm still technically a distributor and I still bring in passive income from all those years of building it and I use the products, but that I don't need the income anymore. And so I was like, okay, if I was going to build my business from scratch and I have, I'm lucky I have this to support myself financially while I am, what would I do? And for me personally, again, it depends on how you're utilizing your business. If you want to approach network marketing as more an affiliate business, then you totally can do that. But for me, because I was diving into business coaching, I felt very torn and I felt like I had one leg here and one leg there. And I was like 50-50. And I said, I need to go 100. I need to go all in on one because for me, doing the 50-50 wasn't working. And so I actually put again, don't recommend this for everyone necessarily. This is what I needed to do. I had my direct deposit go into an account I didn't see so that I thought I was like not making any money, basically. And for some reason, like visually, when you don't see that security come in, that lit a fire. Even though I know it's in this other account, I know I could easily access it. It's like hard for me to go see it. That lit a fire under me. And I was like, okay, I've got to make this other business work. And that changed everything. I went all in on that. I really started it from scratch, but utilizing my audience I had already built. And that's what I recommend to anyone who's listening to this. You've already built some type of community and you have some social presence. If you've been using social media for network marketing, I didn't have to change that much, right? Over time, I did start to weave in new things. And personally, for me, I didn't do a big I'm not doing Beachbody anymore. I didn't do a big announcement post. I just started talking about my next offer. That's really it. I wasn't like, hey, big thing. When I did switch from fitness and health to business, I kind of did a little bit of a announcement because it was just a different niche and I knew I'd lose a lot of people, which was fine. But the first transition was actually a very similar audience that I was talking to. It was health and wellness. So I just started talking about my new offers. I started talking to that new ideal client or similar ideal client and didn't make a big deal about it, if that makes sense. And that seemed to work pretty well for me.
Yeah, I love that. And I feel like that's such a takes like the pressure off of you. Like you're like, I'm just talking
Yeah.
about like that's other thing that interests me and this other thing that I'm doing. And then you just kind of start
Yeah.
weaning the other thing out.
Yeah.
Also genius about making your check go somewhere else and
Right.
like putting that like pressure on yourself just a little bit. Like,
Just a tiny bit. Like I know it's there,
yeah.
but visually seeing it, it's like that comfort blanket. And I was like, this comfort blanket is holding me back from actually going all in. And I've seen this with so many people I've worked with where like they'll lose their job or they'll get a big pay cut or whatever, and then their business takes off because they were like
Yeah,
kind
me
of
too.
half-assing it,
Yeah.
because they didn't have to.
'Cause that yeah, and I mean, I can think of myself in that moment too because I'm still a full-time high school Spanish teacher, so I know that,
Mm,
like, so, like, in my mind, I'm like, "Oh." I'm like, "Maybe I need to start putting that in another bank account, and that'll light the
yeah.
fire just a little bit because that's such good motivation.
Right.
Yeah. Well, and
Totally.
because
Could
same
work.
thing, I've had clients and I've had, other people that I look up to who their business really takes off when they've lost a job, had a pay cut,
Yeah.
something like big like that has happened because I do think that
Yeah.
can motivate you a ton.
They're like, all right, got to work. It's got to make something work, you know?
Got to do it. So before we hop off of here, because I don't want to take too much of your time because I appreciate it so much, but what is one piece of advice that you have for the woman who is looking forward to 2023 next year and is like, it's time for me like to go all in on my business, or I'm going to make this pivot or something, something that's feeling just a little bit bigger than what she's currently doing. What would you tell her?
Ooh, I would say, I think the biggest piece of advice I'd give right now, and it's very timely for me, so I'm giving it to myself too, is don't just rinse and repeat necessarily what's worked in the past. Like, take a really good look and go, how do I actually want to show up every day? What conversations do I want to be having? What kind of content am I excited to create? Because a lot of times when we're doing year planning, we just kind of look at what we did, or like, okay, I did this, I just want to scale this, right? Maybe I got 5 people in this program, now I want to get 50 next year. And by the end of it, we look and we're like, I actually don't really love the program though. And that's actually stopping us from filling it. And so I just see this happen a lot. So I recommend going, how do I actually want to spend my time? What do I want to be talking about? Like, what will get me excited? And how can I create offers and think ways to make money that align with that versus just rinsing and repeating? Because then sure, you can make some money, but if you're like not excited about how you're showing up every day, what's the point? If you're like, meh, this is fine, then how's it different than a 9 to 5 that you're not that excited about?
So. Yeah, that alignment piece is so huge. And I've been there, done that too. Or I've been working with a coach myself, like not right now, but in the past where we've been working together on an offer and, she'll tell me one thing and I'm like, yeah, that's good. That's good. And then the more I think about it, I'm like, that's not like, I find myself not talking about it or whatever, because it's not aligned with me. And I think that that's an important reminder. If anytime, we're really feeling stuck or we're feeling like that resistance, it's probably that you're out of alignment with whatever it is that you're doing, and really being aware of that can be really, really huge for your business.
And I think you hit a good point. Like, even if a mentor, I say this to my clients all the time. I'm like, hey, if I give you a piece of advice or I give you suggestion, because I'm like, oh, there's such an, I did this today on I'm running this like 3-week mini mastermind for like planning for 2023. And I have a suggestion for someone because I'm like, oh my gosh, you could thrive in this niche. And they're mulling it over to see. And I said, hey, if this doesn't feel right, don't do it. Like, you can say no to me. It's okay. I've said no to my coaches too. Like, they're not the end all be all. They don't have all the perfect answers. They're just throwing out ideas. So I love that you said that, because like, I think we sometimes think we have to follow everything exactly. It's like, trust your gut too. It's there for a reason.
Yeah. And I think so many times we can push that intuition aside because it sounds ideal with, what someone is telling us, or this is what we should be doing. But like, that intuition is there for a reason.
Totally.
Yeah, I love it. So you're reading Atomic Habits right now. Are you reading anything else? Or are you like a 1 book at a time kind of gal?
No, I'm like a 4 book at a time kind of gal.
I was wondering.
So many. Well, right now I'm reading 3. I'm reading Atomic Habits, The Surrender Experiment by Michael Singer. Yeah. Have you read Untethered Soul?
No, I haven't even heard of it.
He wrote that. I love it because I love learning through story. Like, if someone just tells me their story, there's so many nuggets in there, and it's basically his story about his surrendering and meditation and all of that. It's so good. And definitely needed this year. So I was like, I need to surrender to life happening. So I'm going to read this book. Game changing. Absolutely loving it. And then I'm just reading fiction books because I'm a big fantasy fiction book. I'm reading a Court of Thorns and Roses series. I'm in the last book for the 2nd time. So that's just for fun.
Awesome. I'm reading the last Outlander book. So I totally get that too.
Oh, everyone's telling me I need to read that. So that's going to be on next for me, because I've been hearing a lot about that.
Have you watched the show on Netflix?
No, that's why they're like, if you haven't watched it yet, read the books and then go watch it. I was like, okay, I'll do it.
Yeah, I did it in the opposite order, which I'm okay with because I really love the show too. But if you're like a historical fiction kind of historical, kind of fantasy, but it's a good one.
I love it.
I love that too. That's why I asked. I was like, are you a 1 book or a 4 book kind of person? Because I'm
all the books. All the books. At different times of day. Like, I'll go in the morning, I'll read like personal growth, and then like at night when I want to wind down, I read my fantasy books.
I'm the same way. I'm the exact same way. That's so funny.
Yeah.
Okay, Megan. So tell us all the places that we can connect with you. And guys, I'll be sure to put this in the show notes so you can just click and all the places.
Awesome. Thank you so much for having me. Since you're listening to a podcast already, the Pretty Awkward Entrepreneur podcast is definitely where my best stuff is, hands down, the most transparent, the most honest. So the Pretty Awkward Entrepreneur podcast. And then Instagram at Megan Yelaney. It's MEGANYELANEY. Those are probably the main places that you can come say hi.
Awesome. Well, yes, everyone go check her out. Like I said, I have been following, I'm pretty sure, probably since you launched your podcast.
Oh my gosh, I love it.
Yeah, following your podcast, longtime listener right here. So absolutely love it. So everyone go and check that out. And Megan, again, thanks so much for your time. We really appreciate you.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
You're so welcome.